notice and attempt to ground. Knowing if I fail to lift the veil, I'm hellbound. Journey through the fate of all the hate I found. Done laying out the laments for these lames, big clowns. We can still throw down pound for pound if you choose to drag my name through the mud with no bounds. Scars go deep, but the passion can shift. Trying to find a balance between anger and bliss. Searching for my purpose when success is a myth. I thought I knew the gist of the plot, but it came with a twist. Had it all mapped out, but none of the pieces fit. Abandonment issues got me doing the split. Realizing I didn't really need what I wish. Got sick of getting tricked into giving the devil a kiss. Welcome to the side of hell. They got me under respect. Story to tell as soon as I break out of this shell. Welcome to the side of hell.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Portal to the Paranormal Thriller Podcast Live. Tonight we've got a great guest joining us in a moment, but just a few things before we start. As always, thank you for joining us tonight. If you've got any questions for our guest, put them in the comments and we'll do our best to read them out. But tonight I'm joined by an author, historian, paranormal investigator, a trick of all trades by the sounds of it, Penny Griffiths-Morgan. So we're going to just pop her on now. Good evening,
hello.
Penny. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good, thank you.
Good,
I'm a bit croaky. I've got my son's... Oh, thank you. Well, please don't judge if people suddenly start seeing me sniffing or grabbing my drink or whatever. I'll try and I'm pseudo-fedded up to get so we can have a good chat, hopefully.
Just let me know, and I'm sure I can find something else to talk about for a moment. There's a few hellos in the room. So we've got Lynn that's in the room saying hello. Hello, Lynn. Hello, Tara. These might be people your end, Penny. Melinda.
No.
Again, Lynn.
I know
Daniel.
him.
Hey, there's our big boss. Yeah.
I know her.
Sarah's in the room as well. So yeah, a few people saying hello to you, Penny. So again, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you back on, because the last time you spoke with Sarah, and it was a great show. But what I want to do is just start off really by doing a bit of a recap with you. So we know from our description, author, you're a historian, you're a paranormal investigator. So firstly, the most common question that we ask is, how did it all start for you?
Well, the history of the paranormal.
Well, which part of that was it? The history that started for you, or the paranormal? Which one of the fields were your first bits?
It was paranormal. It was the paranormal side. I mean, I was one of those kids whose parents had a National Trust membership from a very young age, who would drag us around to every single castle on holiday in our caravan that they could. And at the time, I hated it, didn't understand it. And now I'm a parent myself. I get it, why they did it. Let your kids run loose over some castle ruins for 4 hours. It knackers them out. And hopefully they absorb a bit of it. But I didn't really get into history until I was about 12 when I went to secondary school. And I had the most amazing history teacher who, he was a bit odd, but in a cool way, in that, he encouraged me to ask questions. He encouraged me to challenge opinions and all of that kind of thing. But before that, the paranormal side, I've told this story before, but I've always had experiences of things from a young age. And the first one that really comes to mind was the village I grew up in. I grew up in Norfolk. I'm from Essex originally. Parents ripped me from Essex at 3 years old and made me move to Norfolk. And we're in a tiny little village in the middle of nowhere, really in the boonies. And there was like old buildings, sort of derelict. And there was this old barn, beautiful old barn, derelict. And my little sister and I always used to joke it was haunted, as kids do, because it looks eerie, full of cobwebs, probably had vermin running around in it. Anyway, I must have been about 9, 10, around that sort of age. That sort of age. And we were walking the dog in the village. But this village was tiny. I mean, you're looking at 100 houses, if that, in the whole village. Everyone knew each other. And it was one of those really safe places that as a 10-year-old kid, you could walk around with your dog and you were safe. And I remember my sister was 3 years younger than me, and we dared each other to look through the door of this building. And it was one of those, no, you do it. No, you do it. No, we'll do it together. And as we're looking through, there was this bright light flying around. And the only thing I can equate it to was like Tinkerbell from Peter Pan. It had that kind of flying, sort of darting. And it wasn't, I mean, looking back on it now as an adult, knowing what I know now, it wasn't following an air pattern. It wasn't an insect. It was kind of had its own course it wanted to follow. And I remember it flying up to us where we were at the door, the hole we were looking through, hovering for a split second, and then just vanished. Now, there was nothing shining into there. We don't know what could have caused it. But the weirdest thing was my sister and I both felt, and even our dog at the time, it was like we were suddenly frozen for that split second. It was like time stopped. And we both went, huh? It was like something, everything. And that kind of made me think there's stuff that we don't understand. And then there'd be things like I'd hear footsteps in our house. I mean, our house wasn't old. It was 1960s, but obviously the land had stuff on it before the house had been built. And we'd all be in the living room. We'd hear footsteps on the landing. I think one time my dad used to work away from home, and I thought I saw a shadow walk past the glass door for our living room, and all excited as kids would be, thinking Dad's come home early, went flying out there. There's no one there, but I saw it. I saw a shadow of a man come past, and it was things like that that just made me, even as a kid, think there is something here. There's something that we don't know. I probably sort of tried to, when I got into my late 20s, I thought, oh, I'm going to try and blank this out, be normal, get a mortgage, all that kind of stuff. But then once I hit my mid-30s, it was like, nah, you can't blank this stuff out. It's there. So, and that's how it started, and it's been like that really ever since.
So you say that you went through a period of time where you sort of blocked it all out. Coming back into it, what made you get yourself back into the field then? Was that something that happened that sort of pulled you back in from a break from it, or?
I think it was just sort of thinking, I don't care if people think this is odd. So, as simple as that. I kind of got to the stage where I didn't care anymore if people thought I was a bit weird. And that's really how I restarted. And it was actually, I was doing a night feed. I think it was my youngest, so not the son that you met before we came on air, who I've just been trying to gesticulate at because he's making noise in the background, and I'm trying to gesticulate at him to keep quiet. So yeah, he wasn't him. It was his younger brother, who's 9.5, and I was doing a night feed, and you've got children, haven't you, Nando? You know the whole the night feed things, and
I know,
yeah, you've been there. And it was about 2:00 in the morning, and I'm hopping through the television channels to see if anything comes on. And there was these guys doing ghost hunting with all these gadgets and stuff. And I was thinking, this is really cool. Couldn't understand a word they were saying. It was the Tennessee Wraith Chasers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I started thinking, this is really cool. And then the next day I said to my husband, I want to have a go at this. And he's like, go for it. So the next day I started Googling local groups that were prepared to train me, and went from there, really. So it's all the Tennessee Wraith Chasers' fault. If I hadn't seen them, people wouldn't have to put up with me now.
And going through the paranormal, you are right in what you're saying. It's a bit weird that a lot of people avoid it because I think partly they're scared of the unknown, because that's what it's based on, is the unknown. What kind of, like, when you've told your friends what you do then, and when you started telling people that you're getting really involved in it, what was their sort of take on you doing it as well?
Not a lot. because they were like, I think one of my friends said it's about time.
Okay, so that's it.
Yeah, quite a few of them were like, and it's the people who find it. I find it harder to sometimes admit it to. It's like my day job, my other side, my like mortgage paying side. They're not always that keen on it, but that's where I'm quite careful who I tell what I do. I make sure they know that I'm not some, devil conjuring nut job, because there are still people that think like that. But most people now, and it's like when my husband explains it to people, and he's like, they do experiments, they do research. It's not just a case of every single knock is a ghost. It's there is a bit more to it than that, and also because I've got the history side, I've got that added sort of almost layer. I'm not an academic. I've never done a degree or anything like that, but I'm self-taught. But it's that added layer of, well, if a name comes through on a Ovilus, for example, which I've had happen, and I've then managed to actually find that person and find their background and it all fits, it's quite hard to dismiss it as being hokum. So no, most people, I mean, my mum is sometimes, when I first started doing it, she was like, I don't tell people you hunt ghosts. I don't tell. I was like, well, it's not quite like that. It's a bit different to I hunt ghosts, Mum. But now as time has progressed, the fact that, oh, wow, thank you. And now that, because I write for Haunted Magazine, I've written for Haunted Magazine now for 3 years, if not more. In fact, my article's on the cover of this month's, or this issue's Haunted Magazine. I have appeared on Help My House is Haunted a few times now as well. I did the Spectre or Spectacle film that people like Dr. Kate Sherrill, Jane Harris, all those kind of people are in. So I'm starting to get it's becoming a lot less of a well, it's still a hobby, but there's validity to it. So even my mum tells people, and she'll tell people, yeah, Penny's written 4 books, Penny has a podcast, Penny does this, Penny's been on television, and it's all more acceptable now because they can see it's not a case of, oh, if you don't believe in ghosts, then you're bad. It's more a case of, let's look and see what's going on and see if we can explain it, because if we can't, it's paranormal because we can't explain it.
And with the paranormal, one thing that I find that is a lot of people do focus on, and you sort of touch base on it about the devil and the conjuring. And do you think people are too quick? Because sometimes when you look at certain TV shows, they're very quick to say this is something demonic and something evil. And we've been in locations where we have felt unsettled. But to us, we don't go and say this is evil. What's your take on demonic entities? Do you think that these are real, or do you think it's just like TV shows playing in people's minds that are making them overreact and overthink?
How long have you got?
As long as you want. Yeah.
It drives me nuts. It drives me nuts that it seems to be one of the current things is it's demonic. I mean, when people first come on a ghost hunt, like the big sort of corporate event, public events, and people, I don't want to get possessed by a demon, and I'll be like, I know some people might say I'm possessed at times, but I'm not. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've never been possessed, and I've gone into some places where, in theory, I could be. In theory, because, and my thing to them is, there are going to be people in life, living people. Am I allowed to swear on this? Am I allowed to use bad language? Yeah. There are going to be people in life who we meet who are right and utter evil bastards. They're still going to be the same level of evil when they die. Could it not just be them who are the demonic ones? Could it not be them that are making people feel uneasy? Because I know, as a woman, there are times when I've gone into a place and there's loads of living, breathing people around, and one of them will give me that, oh gosh, no, I don't want to be in a room on my own with them feeling. Could that not be what people feel sometimes from a spirit? I don't know whether demons exist. I know there's an awful lot of demonologists who say they do, but they're not what everyone thinks, that they're not in every single place. I mean, when you watch certain programs, and I hate to say it's predominantly American ones, and I love the Americans. I've got some very good American friends, but it seems to be an awful lot of the American ones. But I do wonder if that's more down to the fact that America is more steeped in religion. You know, you tend to find more churches in America. You tend to find more people have a religious belief system in America, whereas the UK seems to be almost more atheist at times. And I do wonder if that's part of the reason. But it's like when I did an investigation at Harwich Redoubt, and I think it was a child. It felt like a child, and they were holding my hand. And when I said this to someone, they went, "Oh my gosh, it was a demon masquerading as a child." And I went, "Couldn't a child just be a child? Why does it always have to be a demon masquerading as something?" So if it's a really nice person who's chatting away to you, being, "Oh no, it's a demon trying to win," why can't it just be someone who was friendly, who died, who is still friendly?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't believe your personality is going to change after you have passed away. If you're a nice person in life, would you not be a nice person in death? Because that's your essence, that's your spirit. So no, I think it's used too much, and I think sometimes it is just a case of it was somebody who was a bit of a nasty bastard in real life, male or female. I mean, could it be that maybe they are part demon? I don't know. Maybe they are, but no, I am not a everything negative is a demon believer. I think it's thrown out there far too much. And I think a lot of investigators who use it are doing it by copying the television programs rather than sometimes thinking about it themselves. Like I say, I know people who are demonologists. Maybe they do exist, but even the friends I've got who are demonologists won't say every single place has got one.
I think that's the problem. You get people that will come along and then they try and say that they've been possessed, and they suddenly go from 1 minute they're fine, suddenly they collapse, and then the next minute they're fine again. And it's just hard to, how can you be sure if you're not using what you've seen on TV and trying to implement that into your investigation? It's a hard one because, like you said, demons, because they also say like things like demons, incubus, is it? They're no living things. And how do they become part of our like portal or our world if they've never actually existed? And that's the thing that I've never got my head around. It's that side of it.
I think it's not an area that I've ever gone mega sort of academically, scholastically into. It's something that I'll leave that to the demonologists. That's their thing. But what I do find is interesting is when you sort of talk to people like Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, who is a psychologist and a parapsychologist. And he's very much, I think it was last year or the year before, he was doing a lot of awareness about psychological work when you're doing paranormal investigating, because there were some of the live Facebook livers who were taking people who were quite obviously had psychological problems and manipulating that for viewing figures, saying that they were possessed. And it was quite obvious they had psychological problems. I mean, we know now, looking from a historical perspective, we can look at people who were in mental health facilities, so the lunatic asylum in the 1800s, who we know now, who they would possess, they were this, they were that. No, they had schizophrenia, or they had dissociative identity disorders, all those kind of things that we now know isn't a demon. It's a medical thing. So I kind of, that's where being the nerdy historian comes in, because I can sort of see these things. And I'll say, I know Dr. Kieran O'Keefe was doing an awful lot on, being aware of the psychological aspect on people who might have a bit of a sensitive hold on reality. It can be dangerous. And you've got to, if one of them says they think they're seeing, I don't know, Jack the Ripper in their home. I'm trying to deliberately not say the person who I'm thinking of, but because people know which show I'm talking about. But Jack the Ripper in their home, rather than assume straight away when they've got books on Jack the Ripper in their house everywhere. Maybe look into their medical history if you can, but then you should be a qualified psychologist to be able to do that, because otherwise you don't know what you're looking at. So there is certainly an aspect of care and duty of care with those kind of things. So I know it's digressed a bit from the whole demons, but
no, that's fine.
I did say, how long have you got?
Yeah, you did. And just that Scott Mathewson from Paranormal and History Scotland, he's just put on the word demonic is used way too much. To me, it's either a grumpy spirit, a bit like what you were saying, or someone who wasn't pleasant in life. Just his opinion. But he's also,
I agree with Scott, and I agree again. Like I say, I think it was someone who was an evil git in life. And do you think if the more we go to a location, the more the spirit remembers? Yes, very much so.
I like that question.
Yeah, very much so.
You know, a lot of people do tend to go to, locations more than once. And like Scott was asking, it sort of builds up, you build a story, don't you? Because I think sometimes you can go to one location and it's completely dead, like nothing will happen. So you need to go back. But like Scott was just asking, I've asked this question before. Do you think when you go to a new location and there's spirits there, do you think they are afraid of us, even though they're in the spirit world? Do you think that they are afraid and we've got to go back a few times so they can get to know who we are and what we're actually doing?
Without sounding rude, I think that would be a huge overgeneralization, because if we look at them as being sentient beings, you will sometimes meet someone that you bond with straight away, and it feels like you've known them forever. They don't have to keep coming back. Yet there might be someone who's more of a slow burn to get to trust them. I think that's the same thing. I think it's more down in my experience, the sort of tiny amount I've had really, I think it's more down to the energies. Because when I did my first investigation at RAF Tibenham, which is an old American airbase, which is where the actor Jimmy Stewart flew from, or one of them, in World War II, I'd been going there since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. 40-odd years by this point I've been going there. And even as a kid, me and my sister used to say there were certain areas of it we felt we were watched. We felt there was someone there. We weren't alone. You know that feeling when you go into a room and you almost feel like there's loads of people around you, but you can't see them, but you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to feel that as kids. There were certain parts of the old clubhouse, which was only built in the 60s, so it wasn't authentic to the old airfield, that we would go through as quickly as possible because it scared us. There's no logical reason, but I still had that feeling now. And it was interesting when I took someone there who was a medium who'd never been. She went, "Whoa, this is heavy in here." And I'd not told her. I'd not told her what I'd felt. But when I first investigated it, now I knew there was stuff there. I knew there was, because it took 4 or 5 hours before things started to flow. And it was almost like they had to know that we genuinely wanted to see them, because the way I look at it is, if you've spent 50 years in our time going, hello, I'm here. Do you want to hear what? And everyone's ignoring you. I'd get pretty annoyed, wouldn't you? I'd be a bit like, okay, I won't bother then. And now you've got these people sitting there going, yeah, we do want you to talk to us. I'd almost be sort of, are you sure? Because you've been ignoring me the whole time. Now you want, and it's almost like you've got to build. That's the trust, I think. That's how it feels when I've done Tibenham anyway. And I did an actual public investigation there back in July, and certain parts that I've always found quite busy when I've been there were really quiet for the new people. And it was interesting because I think there is an element of trust, but there's also an element of energy, and also an element of, I think, yeah, we do really want to hear you. Because it's like if you say to a friend, look, if you need to talk to me, just talk. And every time they do it, you're too busy to listen, or you fall asleep when they're talking to you or whatever, that friend's going to start going, you don't really want to listen to me, do you? And they're not going to do it anymore. And I think in certain places that aren't investigated, but then again, I also think places can get investigation fatigue and sometimes need a rest.
Yeah.
So I think it really, Yes, I do think they can build more trust, but I also think that sometimes a spirit will just take to you straight away, like you would take to a living human.
Yeah. And do you think, like, the energy that you bring into a location, do you think that affects the investigations that we carry out? So if you go in with a good vibe, you could potentially have a bet because you're building the right energy. Do you think that has a play in the investigations that we carry out?
I think I know I've been on public investigations with members of the public, and you could know that someone's blocking it. You know that someone's come in with such negative, this is all bull kind of energy, that they're blocking it. And the minute you remove them from the situation, everything starts happening. You know, and I have seen that, whether it's their energy or whether they have some. Whereas you have some people who are able to almost be conduits for the energy, like they're able to, just having them in a room has things start happening that other people are witnessing. I'm wondering if that you can have some people who are the opposite. You know, when you get those people who say, "Oh, I've done all these investigations and nothing's ever happened," I don't believe them. I don't believe that nothing has ever happened. I think it's more a case of they've never noticed it because they're waiting for a book to fly off a bookshelf or a ghost to stand in front of them and go, "Hi." You know, they're not waiting for the noise that nobody can explain. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I did Gresson Hall Workhouse in Norfolk, and I mean, workhouses is my thing. That's probably my specialism. And I wandered off on my own because I'm like that. Now, Gresson Hall was shut for 3 months of the year. And it had been shut, so there'd been no heating on. I mean, I can tell you, it was freezing, and it was weather like we've got at the moment. And I was chatting away like I do, chatting away to whoever's in there. And I said, "If you're here, can you make a noise? Can you let me know if I can help at all?" And I heard a tap, tap, tap on a metal pipe. And I was like, "It's interesting. Okay." And they did it again, and I asked them to, and I'm thinking, oh, it's just the heating pipes flexing. The common thing, isn't it? People are tapping on a pipe, they think it's communication. And I was chatting to a plumber friend of mine about it, and he went, "It won't have been the heating pipes flexing." I said, "Why?" And he goes, "They've been off for 3 months. They won't still be flexing." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool, all right, that's." But it was that kind of I'm not a skeptic, but I don't believe everything. I did chat to the person as though they were there, but in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, that's not real evidence because it could just be the heating pipes flexing. And yet, so I speak to an expert who says, no, that wouldn't have been the heating pipes flexing. So I just think but I think some people can block energy. And I also think that some people will just whatever they hear. I mean, I was on one investigation, we were getting the spirit box to say, just use a word to describe us. I love doing that one. And what did I got buxom, it used. And I'm killing myself laughing that this male spirit has called me buxom. And this woman goes, "What does buxom mean?" And I went, "Well, sort of curvy and quite well endowed and stuff." And she went, "That's not what it said." And I was like, and she was jealous because her word was sour. But it was an accurate description of her. She had been like that all night. And she was just so nasty. But she was still having stuff happen. But she was annoyed that but she was like, "That's not what they said." Now, we recorded it. We played it back. It did say it. But she was like, "That's not what it said. That's not what it said." So, yeah, it's negative energy. But I do actually think that sometimes spirits, if they've got someone who's that nasty, if you like, that they will do stuff to sort of go, almost stick their fingers up at them and go, "We don't particularly want you here. If you're going to be this obnoxious to people, you're a bully." So I don't know if I think I always when I take newbies on an investigation, and I know we were talking about the fact I'm training my son up to do investigating as well. I always say to people, go with the Monsters Inc. theory, that laughter produces more energy than fear. So I go in cracking jokes, not at their expense, at my own expense. I don't laugh at the spirits. I laugh at myself. and to create energy that way. And that's the kind of attitude I try to go in with, because I want to be, I want to be a positive energy for them, especially if they've gone through something traumatic in their lives. You know, if I go in all miserable and antagonistic and everything else, it's not going to be nice for them, is it?
No, and I agree with what you say. Is going in with the building the right energy and having a laugh. Our team are all about. We do take, because you got to respect the location. There's history there, and you want to respect it. But at the same time, we always encourage our guests, and anyone that's on an investigation with us to have a laugh at the same time. Because we do find, and I don't know if you agree with this, sometimes you could be focusing so much on an experiment and nothing's happening, but you ever diverse away from the experiment and start talking amongst yourselves.
Ignore them.
Yeah. And then you suddenly get the things that happen, like, okay, I'm not doing, I've not done anything, but now I'm going to let you know that I am here in the background.
Boy, I haven't finished yet. Yeah, I do that all the time. I can't remember who I was with. I was on an investigation and I started doing that, and somebody goes, "Oh, we were doing a calling out session." I said, "I know, I'm doing this deliberately. I changed the subject deliberately, and guess what? It started happening again." No, it's I do. I find it quite funny. It's almost like a petulant child sometimes, that you ignore them, and the minute you ignore them and start talking to somebody else, they're like, "Oh, well, you want me to do this? You want me to go to bed now, do you?" So yeah.
So just to go back to comments, so Laura has put, there is a location we do regularly. This is Paranormal and History Scotland, I believe. At first, I was scared of the tall man with the hat, but after doing this location a few times, I've learned he's no harm to me, only protecting his family. I even did a lone vigil and didn't feel scared at all. And I think that's great. If you can build up the courage to do, I'll be honest, just a little bit. I started doing this because Sarah's been into the paranormal for years. Yeah. And then Dan started Portal to the Paranormal during the pandemic. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to dip my toes in it. And it was only meant to be helping out with events, like getting events booked. And then I started going on it. And I never realized how popular the paranormal actually is. I thought, I've got to be honest, when Sarah started doing it, I was like, you're going to go and play Ghostbusters with your friends. That's what I used to say. And it's just now, it's just amazing. And the people that you get to speak to, like yourself, Penny, and, we've spoken to Karen, and, just all of you are amazing people. Scott from Paranormal and History. Yeah. It's just been such a great experience to, learn from other people, but get their insight, because this field is very, everyone has different opinions, everyone believes in different, and I just think it's great to be able to bring it all together and everyone just sort of discussing it and putting their opinions across and see how different people work. And I've veered off a little bit there, but going back to it, talking about difference of opinions. Now, a lot of different people, especially with events, they do like a seance at the start of it, where they set like a protection chant. Do you believe in these chants, and do you believe that they work to protect you throughout your investigation, or do you just get stuck in and just get on with it?
When I did the public, I don't run many public investigations. I go on quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I have taught myself to shield myself, because it was a mistake I made in early days. I'd come away absolutely physically drained, and I realized it was because I wasn't protecting myself and emotionally enough. So I did teach myself how to do it. But I think it's a case of, if someone wants to learn, you can teach them. But I personally don't think I think it's more, it might work for a few people in the group when you do the big group ones, when you do public investigations. But I'll talk someone through what I do if they ask. But I think it. I just don't. I think when you've got big group investigations, you don't know that everyone's doing the visualization as you're going through it, for example. So you can't. I went through a phase of wearing certain crystals when I did investigations, that I felt wearing a pentagram as a protection sort of thing, But I I don't know. I personally don't feel you have to protect yourself. I think people who worry about being possessed are those who watch the shows, who see the coming back to the demons again, because I've had spirits follow me home. I remember I did an investigation at the British School Museum in Hitchin. I kid you not, I'm driving home in my car at sort of 3 o'clock in the morning, and I saw someone sitting in my back seat for a split second. It was a kid. And I said to them, you can't come home with me. You've got to go back to the school. Vanished. So, and I was a bit kind of like, oh, maybe I'm too tired. Maybe I need more Haribo. I don't know. But, if I think I've had a hitchhiker, I will send them home. I will say to them, you can't stay. When I've gone to Epping Forest, I'm writing a book on at the moment, there's been a few that have latched onto us very quickly. And it's a case of saying, you've got to stay here. This is where you've got to be, but I'll be back. I will be back. So I don't know. I think if a protection on yourself, learn how to do it. That's probably what I would say. I mean, Scott's just come up with something. I just saw it flash up. Yeah, I always say thank you to them. I think, I can't remember if it was my son or my husband said to me, do you feel weird when they communicate with you? And I said, no, I feel grateful. I feel honoured and grateful that they trust me enough to talk. So I say thank you.
And I think introducing yourself as well. We got to work with Brian Laverty from Huntophobia in Canada. He comes to the UK. And one thing he does on every investigator, he introduces himself before he starts anything. And I think that's that's what we would do in, if we was to speak to someone that we're meeting for the first time, we introduce each other. So why not be the same with the spirit? So really good. With regards to, you just touched base on your books, you've written quite a few books.
Yep.
Let me just get some of these up. So there
That's
we go.
The 4 current ones. Yep.
So, absolutely brilliant. The ones that I was looking at, firstly, is the Haunted Experiment.
Yep.
So based on what I got from the book, is that you've listened, I don't know if it's something that you've watched on TV or other podcasts, but you've listened to people's investigations and the kind of experiments that they're doing, and you've tried to, mimic what they've done. What kind of things have you done with that?
Well, the whole thought process for a Haunted Experiment came from, I was, and I'm sort of dropping names here, I did a Daily Mail photo shoot for Women in the Paranormal. Oh, crumbs. 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. And you had Hazel Ford was there. MJ Dixon was there. I'm trying to think who else was there now. Jolene Jackson was there. And they're all nattering about various things. And they were talking about EVPs. And I said, where can I find out the history of this? Because everything has a history. Whether you're talking about the paranormal, whether you're talking about World War II, everything has a history. And I was interested in what the history behind people coming up with these methods to monitor, for want of a better term, paranormal activity. And that gave me the thought about Haunted Experiment. And I thought, well, rather than just write a book that's history, why don't I look into the history of some of these experiments as best as I can, and then possibly try and recreate them somewhere. So, and to see which kind of had quite interesting reactions and which didn't. So I looked at EVPs, because it's one everyone knows EVPs. It's one of the first things you really learn, isn't it, as an investigator? It's what's an EVP. So I looked into that. I looked into the Phillips experiment, where they kind of conjure, for want of a better term, a ghost up. And I had a theory on that one. I looked at the Estes method and actually interviewed one of the guys who came up with it in the book. And I also looked at my favorite experiment to do. And this is my absolute favorite, either called Singapore theory or trigger experiments. And so I tried to look at where the 4 of those came from, the thinking behind them. And then I went into some locations to try them. Excuse me. And I did the Philip experiment at RAF Tibenham. And my husband had, and if anyone buys the book, they can see where's it gone? The picture there is the picture we used on the book. I don't know if you
Okay.
can see that. That's the picture we used. And it was a friend of my husband's. I said, I just need you to draw a US Air Force airman. Just anything you want him to look like, but I need an airman. And I came up with a backstory for him. And we did the experiment. Because it was quite a quick one, we didn't spend months and months prepping the place. It was done over a couple of weeks almost. So I got my dad to take the picture to the clubhouse to leave it there for me. And I was reading out the guy's bio that I'd made up and everything. And I can say that one, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. I'm not saying Tibenham nothing happened, because Tibenham did. But nothing happened in relation to the Philip experiment. We did, we did trigger work, which is one of my favourite ones. So that did actually provoke something at Tibenham. We took an RAF badge, World War II RAF badge, and that that got the spirit box going bonkers, because they didn't like it there. They're US Air Force, they didn't like an RAF badge there. EVPs, they produce stuff. And I do love doing the Estes method, because I think it's a really good way of using a spirit box to see what you can find. And so, so that's how I did it. And choose, I think one of the locations we used, Harwich Redoubt was one of the ones we did Estes method in. And that one, I was there during the day, because I think you can do investigations during the day if you can control your surroundings a bit and not have loads of people coming through. And I had the headphones on, so I couldn't hear what anyone the questions, and all I got was, "Oh my God!" I shouted out, "Oh my God, Americans!" And the people I was with sort of corpsing on the floor, because there were some American tourists behind me had just walked through and were talking quite loud. I didn't know that, but on the spirit box, all I'd heard was, "Oh my God, Americans!" And it was little things like that were quite sort of strange. But yeah, so that's why I did a haunted experiment, to give people the background. A lot of people know how to conduct these experiments. There's loads of brilliant books on how to do experiments. I mean, Sarah Chimasero from Australia, she's done quite a lot of books on it, and they're brilliant. So I wasn't trying to teach people how to do them, more of a, where did it come from, and what thought process was going through the inventor's mind when they came up with them.
And you're talking about experiments. There's so many different types of experiments, and some of the stuff that you've touched on is more, you're using your own abilities, listening, trigger objects.
Yeah.
A lot of experiments now involve technology. You've got the mobile apps, you got all sorts. What are your takes? So if I don't know if you've heard of the app Necrophonic.
Yeah.
It's like, when you think about apps like that people come along and they're talking about those sort of things that they use in, IT apps basically that are designed to do that. Do you believe that they work, or do you think it's just the technology that's making it work?
I love an app. I love a bit of technology, but I never take it in isolation. I'm always measuring what else is going on around. So, for example, at a part of Epping Forest I investigated recently for the new book, one of the team was using Necrophonic, and we kept hearing the word soldiers, fire, soldiers, fire. And he was like, why would there be soldiers here? Now, I knew why. They didn't. I also knew why they were coming up with the word fire. It wasn't as in fire as in fire your gun. It was in, I think, that where they were barracked burnt down during the First World War. And so sometimes but then again, there was, so I think if you take things in isolation, my concern is when someone comes up and they get the word murder come up on one of these apps, and they're like, oh, there must have been a murder take place here. And they try and shoehorn stuff in to meet the word that's come up.
Yeah.
Rather than say, well, actually, it may not. I mean, it's like when you might get someone who says, yes, I was murdered here. Really? Because if you were murdered here in, I don't know, 1887, there'd be a death record for you, because there had to be. There'd be a newspaper report. There'd be there's things like that. So sometimes, no, I don't take them as verbatim, but sometimes the stuff that can come up on them is a bit weird. Like when I've used the iOvilus app on my phone, and I was walking around Bosworth Field where the Battle of Bosworth 1485 took place, and we are getting words coming up that directly relate to 1485, like the month the battle took place, where some of the people were from who fought, France. Other words that came up. There was even, and I can't think what the word was now, but it's a Catholic term for early prayers that came up. And that linked because Richard III overslept, so he didn't have his early prayers, and he was a very strict Catholic. So sometimes when things like that are coming up, you're thinking, okay. But it's also, I mean, I had one recently where I had the spirit box running and the iOvilus running, and the same words came through on both.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant.
And ironically, those words came through as I was telling the children to shush because I couldn't hear the spirit box. And both were. So sometimes, yeah. So I think gadgets, as long as people don't take them as verbatim, as long as people maybe are aware of their situation, aware of if they feel the temperature's dropped, if something's moved up in the corner of their eye, if if they then find out that maybe there was a history of soldiers in that area that not many people know about, for example, I think you can take it, but I don't think you can take it as gospel straight away. I think you have to do some research into it to see if it's actually got any validity or not.
Definitely. And one thing that you did, the other thing that you did touch on this before we went live, we were discussing a bit about it, and you were saying that sometimes people are focused on the experiments but forget about what's happening in the background, like the touches, and and you were saying that they're the key things that sometimes that we miss because we're focusing on the technology. But technology is great, and I do agree with you. You've got to be careful what you're using, because some bits of technology are designed just to throw out stuff, and like you said, you can't take it. That is right. And with all the evidence that you collect, then people get excited, and we get excited as investigators all the time. But you've got to have that level head. Do you always go back home after an investigation and you try and debunk what's happened, like yourself, before saying this is definitely paranormal? Do you go into it and say, okay, well, let's have a look back at this and see if we can debunk it before we actually say this is paranormal?
It depends what the evidence is. So if I've had like I was just saying about the same word came up on the spirit box and the ovilus at the same time, I can't debunk that. Because they don't communicate with each other. It was just it could have been I don't know what the probability. Someone like Steve Higgins from Higgy Pot probably be able to work out the probability of it happening, but I don't know what the probability is going to be. Pretty high, low rather, whichever way round it would be, like 1 in 1.5 million that both gadgets would come up with the same word at the same time. With things like K2s going off. It depends if they're going off on command. So if I've got a K2 that keeps flying up to red, and if I say, look, can you step away? And it drops down, and then, right, can you come back? And it goes up to red again, and you haven't moved. That's the kind of debunking I'll do at the time. Do you know what I mean? I don't sort of take, but it's afterwards that, I'll listen back to EVPs. I will go through the word log on the ovilus. I will, sort of notes that I've made, as they say, if someone's doing an Estes and I'll be making notes while they're doing it of what they're saying, then I might go back and look over it. But I'm normally trying to almost critique stuff as it's happening, like trying to come up with as many. So like the K2 thing, same with the REM pod. If the REM pod's going off, if you can say, can you step away please and stop it making that noise, and it stops, and then you can get it to restart again. Nobody is moving and it's going on and off on command. Bit hard. I mean, I agree with what Jim has said. You don't need technology to talk to them. I agree, because I frequently don't use technology other than maybe a digital recorder to record what's happening, and that's more for my memory. So I can put up fast. But I think the gadgets, if you get something come through on a digital recorder, like a voice, and the K2 has gone off, and the spirit box is going off, and it's kind of like, well, what's the probability of everything triggering at the same time? So I think it just helps validate it. But a lot of the validation I use is the historical validation. It is, if you've got a name, or you've got an event been described to you, or you've got something happen, is if you can find historical validation for that, like it's in a, like, properly documented, it's quite hard to argue. How else would you know?
No, definitely. And, on the same lines, we're talking about different experiments. The Ouija board is something that's a lot of people talk about, the Ouija board. Now, what's your opinion and what's your take on the Ouija board? I have had results on one that I've had results using them that I've been able to validate that nobody else would have known. Okay.
But then again, I've also seen the opposite, where people, again, they try and shoehorn it. Well, not even pushing it. No, I know what you're saying. No, not actually pushing it. But it's a bit like when the word murder comes up on a novel list. Oh, somebody was murdered. If they spell murder, this person was murdered. And I'm like, there is an element of the ideomotor response from a human. I find them interesting, but again, if you've got, so we were talking about experiments and people doing them on television before we came on air, and I said one of the ones that I was watching, oh dear, my Sudafed's working. I was watching, I think it was 28 Days Haunted, and they were doing Estes method experiments, and so I think there was one person, I can't remember who it was, he was doing it, they were all watching him. Oh, there's a woman coming through, she's evil, blah, blah, blah. And then the medium goes into her room. She goes, oh, no, I've got the same woman coming through. And I'm like, I wouldn't have done it like that. I would have had both of them running their experiments at the same time in their own rooms. Now, if they'd both had the same person come through and they'd both seen the same thing without having any influence over the other one, it would have given it a bit more validity. But to me, it could have just been suggested because they've just experienced it with one investigator. So they set it up for the next one who sees the same thing. I kind of, so little things like that, I would tweak. I wouldn't, just to get the element of doubt, cynicism. Because even though I'm not a cynic, I will question things because I want to present my findings to someone, and someone goes, well, did you check this? Yes, I checked that. No, there was no windows open. There was no draft, etc. It's okay. So could somebody have flicked your hair and you not seen them? No, because my back was against a wall. They couldn't touch my hair. All those kind of things. So it just leaves the last, it's paranormal. It's unexplained. Sorry, I can't remember where we were going with this, but...
No, we were talking about the Ouija board and the thoughts of your Ouija board.
So I do think sometimes people shoehorn the information in. Another one, I was doing an investigation at this fort down in Kent, which in the 1800s they had an awful lot of immigration boats leaving for America from, or going around to sort of Liverpool and then go. And I didn't want to do the Ouija board. I sat it out because I was tired. I can't remember why I didn't want to do it. I thought I'd let other people do it. And they were like, who are we speaking to? And it spelled out this girl's name. Okay. And it kept going then AZ. Oh my God, it's a demon. It's something. We've got to cleanse the board. And I went, ask her if she's from Arizona. Yes. But that was my point. I mean, it could have just been someone pushing it. But it's the fact they automatically went to AZ's got to be, and I was thinking, no, AZ is the abbreviation for Arizona. Now, if we had people coming from America or going to America from here, so that's the only thing with Ouija boards. I think they're fun. I think they're a gateway for evil spirits, no more so than a spirit box or any other kind of communication. I used to be very cynical about table tipping. I used to think it was a parlor trick. until I had the most phenomenal table tipping experience at the Four Crosses in Cannock Chase, where myself and one other person had a table dancing down the stairs with one of us either end.
Blimey.
It was dancing down the stairs, and we tried doing it consciously to see if we could get it to, and we couldn't get it to replicate what happened. And that was say that kind of made go a bit like, I've never seen this before. So I think Ouija boards, they are very easily open to manipulation. I think sometimes people mistake the fact sometimes you do have to push the planchette to give it the energy to start moving. They mistake that for people controlling it. I think some people do block them. I've seen that happen before. I've gone onto one and it started moving and I'm not pushing it. And it's still moving when I've stepped away. But I do think they are very open to... I think it's a lot harder to manipulate an EVP or something like that than it is a Ouija board response.
I agree with you. Having an EVP, we've picked up voices where there's no one in the room with us. And that's harder to run. You know, my thing with, like you were saying, with the Ouija board and things like table tipping, it is easy to manipulate into doing something. You know, but my thought on the table tipping, you know, we did an investigation at Manor Farm in Southampton. And, you know, we had a big group of people and the table literally lifted onto two legs. And I thought, you know, and everyone had lifted their hands off the table and it was still on the two legs. And we got a great guy, Luke. He does a lot of filming for us. And he literally got under the table and he was filming the legs just standing on their own and then filming everyone's hand off the table. And that moment got me. And you even see me on the camera when I have to send you the footage. My face looks absolutely shocked. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go home now. I'll see you a lot later. It was one of those moments that I was just like, okay, this is a bit above my grade here. I don't think.
Well, the weird thing was, it was one of those sort of folding tables that everyone likes to use. And it was a Haunted Happenings event. I'd been invited along to do a bit of a talk about the place and everything for people. And it started off with 4 of us on it, like one either end and 2 in the long bit. And the 2 people on the long bit got bored because nothing was happening. It was just me and this guy who'd never done this before, was a total skeptic. And yeah, I did, because I looked at what he was doing, fingertips on the table. There was no pressure. We weren't holding it. And there was people watching. And yeah, we had it coming down the steps, dancing down the steps with us. And I must admit, afterwards, I kind of didn't feel myself afterwards. It felt like someone was controlling it through me, because I did feel quite... I hadn't taken anything. But I didn't feel myself for a good few minutes afterwards. It was strange. He felt like that as well. He just went, what happened? And it was like something you'd taken us over to move this table around as a showman, almost. So I think there's validity in everything, but it's just not believing it without, like you say, hey, Wes! That's Wes from Canada. It's all the way from Canada. It's my good friend Wes. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I think there's validity in everything, but it's just not taking it necessarily in isolation. It's looking at the bigger picture. And it doesn't surprise me that someone in a pub perhaps was a bit of a showman, because, you know, you get people like that in those kind of places, don't you? I think everything. I love hearing ideas. One of my favorite ones that I heard someone come up with, and I can't remember who came up with it first, is using mobile phones. So putting a phone in a room that's already called through to another phone, leaving that phone in and going off with your phone and hearing if you can hear voices.
You know, I've heard that before, and it sounds like a great experiment.
It does, doesn't it? It's just unfortunately the places I've done recently aren't controlled enough to be able to do that. But that's one I would like. It's using sort of modern technology. That would be...
And it's using it in a very basic way as well, isn't it? You're just making a phone call and then seeing what happens with that. And with regards to, we've touched base on different experiences that we've had in the paranormal. Have you ever had an experience or a situation where you think it's pushed you to your limits and you think, oh, this is a bit too much for me to handle? No.
Not yet.
It must be only me then. It must be me.
Not yet. I've had places I've gone into and I've thought I need to keep my wits about me. But I don't think there's been anywhere that it's unnerved me so much that I've said I'm not going back. I think, Wes has mentioned Bodmin because that's how Wes and I first really met. We helped Richard Estep do the research at Bodmin Jail, and Bodmin is amazing. If you haven't investigated Bodmin, you've got to go. You've got to visit there because, I mean, apart from the fact that Kirsten, who runs it, is an amazing person, some of the stuff that happened there over the sort of 2 nights we were investigating there did open my eyes a lot, but not to the stage where I wouldn't go back. I mean, actually, the scariest thing at Bodmin was Wes. And I think he knows the story I'm going to tell. I was there with another mutual friend of ours, Gaynor, and we didn't realise he was sitting in the corner of one of this corridor area. We didn't know he was there. It was pitch black. And her and I are walking up there, and suddenly we hear this voice from the corner, and it's him hiding in he's laughing. He remembers. Yes, he does remember. That made me. That's it. First time I've really jumped because he's got a very, very lovely deep voice as our Wes, and he spoke, and we didn't know he was there, and we both jumped. I think there was a case of like grabbing onto each other, which I don't tend to do, but no, Bodmin Jail is amazing. It is an amazing place, but I honestly don't think there's been anywhere that I've thought, no, I can't handle this. I'd almost like to. I would like to have that kind of I can't go back in there experience, but it's not happened yet. So.
It must be just me. Like Scott pointed out, I'm the only wuss around here. So I take that all day long. Like I said, I only did this initially because it was something Sarah was really into. And then Dan presented an opportunity and I thought, why not? But some of the things that have happened, has pushed me to my limits. And I think maybe because I'm still learning, because you never know exactly. It's always a learning curve with the paranormal, I think. It's nothing.
Could be. I'm probably going to alienate half the people watching. It could just be a man thing, because I mean, my husband's like a 5'9" ex-rugby playing builder. He can cope. He grew up in Harlow, for heaven's sake. He can handle himself. When we did the investigation at Tibbenham, and he heard something shuffling in the gravel behind him, and there's nothing there, he nearly jumped into my arms. I'm 5'2", so. And when he said, "Oh, it just made me jump," yeah, right. He literally jumped onto me. He went and so I don't know. I think I'm just not a I do jump at things, but I've always said this: I'm more scared of the living than I am of the dead.
I hear that a lot of people say that is the living that you should be more scared of. But no. So I'm not the only one, Scott. Just wanted to point out there, as we learned, Penny's husband's a bit like me.
Yeah, you two are the music.
I feel a little bit better now. Oh, Scott just put that is definitely not a man thing.
Yeah, but he's from Glasgow. Thing. He's a Scot. I mean, Scots aren't scared of anything, are they?
No, I need to hang around with Scott a bit more then, by the sounds of it. With regards to your investigations, then, you come from a big history background. Being a historian yourself. Yeah. Different people do things different way in investigations. Yeah. Do you do the history on the investigation before you do your investigations? So do you do history on the location, or do you do the investigation then do the history on the location?
A lot of the times I am writing a book on a location, so I will already know it. And Sorry, Scott's just made me laugh, his comment. Thing is, I can understand him right now because he's writing stuff. It's fine. What was I going to say? Yeah, the problem I have is because I doing Haunted Histories, the podcast, writing for things like the magazine, everything else, I have a very, very broad history knowledge. It's almost impossible for me to go in somewhere completely history blind, so to speak. I always know something. I may not know it in the depth that I would if I've writing a book about it, but I normally know something. What I try not to do is tell the other investigators anything until something comes through that they're going, that doesn't make sense. And I go, well, actually it does.
Yeah.
So, or I try, so I don't deliberately research somewhere before I'm going to investigate it. But the reason I'm normally asked to come and investigate somewhere is to do the history on it for them. So it kind of, yeah. But I try not to tell people anything. I certainly, if they say, can you do a history talk to the public? It's like, right, who wants to hear this? If you don't want to hear this, go out. So all the mediums go out. Sorry, Scott's making me laugh.
He's a good guy, Scott. I like
he's on form tonight, I tell you. All the mediums will go out. All the people who don't want to know the history will go out. And so I'll tell it to give it like a history review, like when I've done, say, Gresson Hall Workhouse for people. But when I'm doing the actual investigation, I will not say, well, actually, in 1854, this happened here or whatever. I will wait and see if something comes through that fits. Then they'll say, is this right? And I'll normally be able to come out and say, well, actually, yes. But so I don't deliberately do the research, but it's normally there anyway, because a lot of the reason a group will ask me to come on an investigation is to act as their historian. So to help with, say, trigger experiments, to help back up with additional information. One of my favorite EVP questions to ask is, was it a king or a queen on the throne when you were around? Because if they say queen, that really limits your time period. But then you've got to know your history to ask, well, was it Elizabeth, Victoria, that kind of thing. So that's not, but yeah, so the answer is I don't deliberately research, but I normally know it anyway, because that's the reason I'm there.
Brilliant. And on the basis of, your history background, you've got the opportunities to be featured on things like Celebrity, Help My House Is Haunted.
Yeah.
And we were actually watching one with you on there the other day. I think it's season 4 that they're doing at the moment. Is it season 4 that they're doing? Sarah, tell me, I got that wrong. But how did that come about then? Was it something that they just, how did they get to know you to be able to ask you to do that for them?
Jane Harris. Jane Harris is a very good friend of mine. And we've done a few public investigations together, and she loves history. She's done my podcast a few times, and she mentioned to me that they were looking for a new historian to join the team, because they don't like to have, they like a different historian in each episode. So it's not like the same historian does all of them. And they were looking for some new ones, and she recommended me and said that I was very good on camera. I was used to talking on camera, which I am. And I could do my own research. And so the first one I did was the Chigwell episode with Frankie Essex. Yeah. And when I told them about Mary Jane Heathcote, which most people had never heard of her. I've actually, the new book I've written more about her story in there, for what happened to her. And I think she was cursed. And I don't throw that word out lightly, but people will find out why I'm saying that when they read it. Bad luck followed her. And then, they said, well, we'll have you back. And so now I'm kind of one of their go-to historians. So I have done an episode for the new Celebrity Help My House Is Haunted series, which I think is February. It lands on Discovery Plus. So that's how they came about. I mean, Jane actually came and saw me do a talk on workhouses at one of when Karen, who does the Festival of the Unexplained, that's happening in September at Festival Hall. she used to do sort of one-day events, and I did a talk at one of those just before COVID, actually. And Jane actually saw that she was there anyway. She came. I asked her to come and see the talk. It was quite nerve-wracking because she's someone I really look up to. And it's just that. It's just word of mouth. And then it's a case if you've got to prove you can do what you say you're going to do. And so I filmed my 3rd episode for them September.
Brilliant. And when it comes to those sort of situations, so they've asked you to look into, you're looking into the land, what's happened, like what was built there before the houses were there. What do you need to do then to find that sort of information? So if someone doesn't really know how a historian works, is it just going back through archive newspaper articles? What do you have to provide them to get the history?
Well, normally they don't lead me that much. They might say this is the area. Well, people think they give me all the information and I just find a few things out. Wes is after something.
We're waiting for the favour to drop in a minute, like the.
What was I going to say? Yeah, so they might say to me, for example, the information I got for the Epping episode, the Chigwell episode, was we think it's something to do with water and death. That was literally what I got. And so I started. I'd start doing like a basic history of the area. So I'd map out a history of the area, see if there's anything jumps out there. Then I will start looking for quite traumatic type deaths that might have happened over sort of the last couple 100 years. One of the things you have to be very careful of is deaths that are going to have happened to family members who are still around. So anything later than the 1950s, 1960s, you have to be very, very careful because you've got to respect people, and a lot of those deaths are going to be horrific murders, suicides. You don't want to upset people if you can really help it. And then I don't know what the haunting is. They don't tell me until afterwards, until after I've given them all my research and said, this is what I found. Then they'll tell me what the haunting is. And in every single case, I have hit the nail on the head with some of the research that fits what they're experiencing. And then I can, so that it's literally, I literally get told, this is the area, this is what we think it's linked to. And that's it.
So they give you minimal information then
very minimal.
Because when you see yourself, you're sort of telling the story, and I love the way you sort of talk about what you found, because you sort of express it in a story format, and you really get out there what the kind of things that that has happened. So I just think it's brilliant that you've got the knowledge to be able to do that. So and as I said, we were watching the other day, and it was great, and it was a good. And your information does tie up to the kind of things that they go on.
I haven't watched the episode yet. I haven't watched that one yet. No, I don't like watching myself. I haven't got around to watching it. I don't get to watch much of stuff that I want to, because a lot of the things I listen to or read or watch are research for a project I'm working on. So I very rarely get to sit and watch these things myself. So I don't know what they found on. I know bits of it because I spoke to Jane, but I don't know what they found on the investigation yet. So I'll let you in on a funny story about that interview. I mean, Jane is a brilliant interviewer. Her and I, because we're good friends, we bounce off each other quite well. And the crew, the Help My House Haunteds crew, film crew, and everything are absolutely amazing. I want to give them a big shout because they're great people. I don't like birds. I'm scared of birds. And they were so good. What you don't see is the house they were doing the investigation in, the mill house. They had loads and loads of chickens roaming everywhere. And as I'm sitting there talking to Jane, I've got 3 chickens getting closer and closer to my leg. And I am trying really hard not to go, because I don't like birds. And then Jane realised that me, these blasted things come to. Not anyone else who likes them, me. And she knows I don't. And she suddenly realised these chickens, and then she went, stop. Because she could see I'm starting to go, God, I'm trying to stay so professional and not scream that these chickens are starting to peck at my feet. That's how professional I am. Anyone watching this, that's how professional I am.
Well, you kept yourself composed then, because it didn't look like there was anything going on around you.
No, there was.
Brilliant. Just to go back, Scott asked a question earlier on. Have you ever had any replies through an app in a different accent? We get a lot of Scottish accents. So what kind of accents have you picked up?
Well, when I was doing RAF Tibbenham, I was out on the runway again with my husband who got scared by the gravel noise. And we were using a spirit box, and we had someone talking to us in an American accent.
Brilliant.
And it was an American airbase. The minute we left there, no American accents.
So that's the thing. Yes. When you get something like that coming through, and it's a different accent, and we're in England, you don't expect to get the American side of it. So that's absolutely brilliant.
And it was actually, that was one that actually made my dad start to believe there was something to this. My dad, who is a mechanical engineer by trade, Brunel educate degree, everything. When we told him what had happened to us, he went and researched, and he actually found the aircrew that this guy was talking about. He actually related it to the date this guy had given us, the name this guy had given us, you name it. And that's when my dad actually started to sort of think that maybe it wasn't all made up.
Definitely. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is we spoke again before the live. You said about your son. He is like a junior investigator. Now, a lot of people have different emotions, different feelings about when you're looking at kids getting involved. People think that they're too sensitive to these sort of things. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that? Because you must be all for it because your son's learning from you, I take it. Can you, what's on younger people getting involved and how you would tell them to investigate if they want to do it?
I personally wouldn't let him go on big public investigations, but that's because I can't control it. He's 13. He's my son. I want to protect him. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to let him go with people other than just myself, it would be on smaller ones where I knew everyone and I knew they would all have the same kind of protectiveness over him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
I would also say to him, and I have done, if you're ever getting really unnerved, we leave. I don't care if I'm doing this for a book. I don't care what the reason is. He's listening right now, I can tell. We leave. We walk away. The thing is, he has been experiencing stuff himself since he was little. I remember I lost my sister when she was 19. So he's never met her. Neither of my children have. My husband hasn't. They all know who she is because I have no qualms talking about her. But she died 27 years ago. When he was about 2 or 3, he didn't talk much. He had a very limited vocabulary. And I could hear him having a conversation with someone. And I said to him, who are you talking to? And he said, the nice lady with the red hair. She says her name is Susie. That's my sister.
Wow.
So, and I was like, whereas some parents might go, I was like, okay, cool. That's all right then. And I think if you don't panic, then they don't panic. And it's a bit like, people are going to shoot me for saying this. It's a bit like how children and dogs. If you teach your child how to interact with a dog properly, any dog, they're less likely to be hurt by one. If you teach them not to panic and to be respectful, they're less likely to be hurt by one. I don't see any difference. I think, like I say, the reason I wouldn't let him go off with a whole group of adults that I don't know is because I'm protective over my child. It's not that I think that a spirit is more likely to hurt him. It's more that he might be put into a situation where he's uncomfortable and he doesn't feel confident to say, I don't like it. But I don't take him on like 2 o'clock in the morning ghost hunts. I think, I would take him out at night, but he still has a bedtime.
Yeah, definitely.
But we've done investigations in Epping Forest in the middle of the day, him and I, and things have happened. So I think as long as he understands how to use the equipment, how to sort of, one of my pet hates is when you get people with a K2 and they're wandering around going, oh, lights here, going off. And you're like, just stand still. Just stand still and see what happens. He's learned that. So he's learned sort of to say thank you when they interact. He's learned to ask. He's learning the difference between a closed question and an open question when he's talking. All those kind of things, which will help him in as he gets older anyway.
Definitely.
So it's a case of don't be scared, be respectful, be polite, and if you're going to do it properly. Is kind of, but I think if he was having nightmares because of things, I wouldn't let him do it. But he's not.
So it's all controlled. So it's controlled in the sense of you know you're not putting him out of his comfort zone and things like that. So it's like you're saying, it's the way you do it. And just to go back on, you were saying that your son had an experience where he identified your sister. If you don't mind me touching base on that, then you said at an early age you experienced stuff. Do you think it's something in the DNA, or something being related? You said about your early ons, and do you think that could be passed on?
I don't know, because I think most children can see and hear stuff. I think a lot of children have that ability. I don't know what other people think, but I've always wondered if those children who say they've got an imaginary friend, is it imaginary?
Or is it they're just taught to switch it off in a way, like the way
I know when it was my husband's cousin, their boy was 2.5, and he was seeing someone in this really old house they lived in, and they were all panicking, and it was one of them said, look, why don't we just talk to Penny and see what her thoughts were? And I talked it through with them, and I said, has this spirit encouraged him to jump out of a window, do something dangerous? No. Is it just talking to him? Yes. Well, he'll probably outgrow it, because not many children keep it. But I do think children, because they believe in stuff that as adults we're taught not to.
Yeah.
And I'm very careful the sort of things I allude to because of Christmas coming up. But they believe in things. So it could be that part of their brain that allows them to see it hasn't been switched off yet. Whereas when they become adults and are taught what you can and can't believe in, it stops seeing it. So I don't know, maybe, or maybe it's just most children do have that ability. They just think it's an imaginary friend as opposed to
something
spirit.
Real. Well, yeah, something spirit. Really. And 2 more questions before I let you go. Firstly, you've written a book, My Haunted History, and it was like highlighting some of the locations that you've done over the years.
Yeah.
What is your favorite location that you've done, and why?
It's not actually in that book.
Okay.
I wrote that book. The book is meant to be it was originally the way I was doing my podcast was I would do half an hour on the history of a place and then half an hour on the hauntings.
Yeah.
I changed my podcast format after that because it didn't flow properly, but that's why that book was written, because I suddenly thought, well, actually, I've got all these sort of notes I've written up for the podcast. It's a book. I think my favorite place that I've ever investigated, which sadly is no more because it burned down, not me, the Leopard Inn in Burslem near Stoke. That place blew my mind.
What things happened there when you did it?
Oh, well, it's more the history of the place, really. I mean, for anyone who never got the chance to go, it's this little pub in Burslem, which is part of like a borough of Stoke-on-Trent.
Yeah.
And it just looks like from the outside your typical spit and sawdust in a town pub that people would have gone in. Out the back was this hotel, three floors of hotel rooms that, I kid you not, you wouldn't have known it was there unless you went through the secret door. And if there's anyone watching who went there, they'll know exactly what I mean by this secret door. And you open this door and then there's just staircases to these rooms. It was mind-blowing, just the history of it.
Yeah.
What was even more mind-blowing is I always thought all my relatives came from, let me think, the northeast. So Middlesbrough, Guisborough, all around that North Yorkshire. And it was when I was about to do this place a few years ago with Chris Chell and the guys from Haunted Houses. My dad goes, oh, you do realise your great-great-great-grandmother was from Burslem? Really? Wow. Okay. No, I didn't. But this place, it was one of those. there was one part of it, and I can't remember where it was, but Chris said to me, see how sensitive you are, because there's this one part that women hate. They feel unsafe in. Men don't. Men get nothing from it. But there's this one bit, all the women who come up here go, I don't feel safe. That kind of intuition, when you're out as a woman and you think you're being followed, that kind of gut feeling that women, we have to have. And I was like, all right. And he goes, I want to see how sensitive you are. See if you can find it. And I was wandering around these 3 floors. And to be honest, not liking birds, I was more worried about the fact there was a lot of pigeon poo everywhere and I was going to get a pigeon in my face. Or some of the floorboards were a bit derelict. And I thought, I'm going to put my foot through something. Or that whole kind of, I shouldn't really be here. Should I? Really? Am I allowed to be? Anyway, I remember walking around this corner and suddenly getting that feeling of being in danger. Like, there is someone bad here. There's someone who would... And I sort of went to a different part. Anyway, I remember telling him where it was that I was freaked out by. And he went, that's where all women say. All the women who go there point that bit out. But it was things like we were on one floor and we were 2 floors above where the next person was. And we heard a woman coughing at the end of our corridor. We weren't there. There was nobody there. We had, we had, you know, the cat balls, the flashing cat balls.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had one thrown past the room we're standing in. We had one gone flying past our room. Somebody had thrown it. What else did we have? We had a table flipped. No one standing by it. It was just, this place was just, you know, it's one of those, when I heard it had burned down, insurance, who knows, I was gutted because this place was, it was amazing. And there was so much there, so much to tap into there that wasn't tapped into yet. That's one of my favorites. Drakelow tunnels, from a historical point of view. I love Drakelow tunnels. That was one of the kind of places where people get scared of. I could sleep down there. It wouldn't bother me. I felt quite, once, apart from being freezing cold, that place was cool. But I just love getting I just find it an honor as a historian that I get to see these places after dark with hardly anyone else around and just sit there and take them in. So whether it's a sort of 500-year-old little house that I'm getting to sit in, or Langard Fort in Felixstowe, which is another favourite of mine, I just find it an honour. Even if there's no activity, the history of it is, it's
amazing.
It's a cool thing to do.
It'll be great to actually do an investigation with you, and you know, I think it'll be absolutely a blast. And on that note, you know, the other thing that I want to touch base on is the upcoming event, Festival of the Unexplained. You're going to be one of the speakers there, and I think you're also arranging the night, like an investigation, are you?
Yeah, I am doing the day trip on the Friday.
Yeah.
I'm not actually having to do an actual talk over the weekend now, because well, I'm going to be talking for about 6 hours in total on the Friday, so I think I'm going to be a bit talked out. I mean, I love the sound of my own voice, but even I have limits. I am going to be there for the whole weekend, but at the moment, I don't believe I'm on the speaker schedule. I mean, that might change. I don't know, but at the moment, I'm not. But I'm responsible for the day trip on the Friday, which I have chosen the location. I am doing the entire tour, and it's going to be me doing it. So it's and I'm very excited about the location.
And just in case people watching that don't know about the Festival of the Unexplained, it's a weekend event where you get not even just from the paranormal. I think like last year you had people about UFOs and you know,
the Kinsella brothers. Yeah, the Kinsella brothers was there. Barry Fitzgerald, who does an awful lot of ufology as well as the paranormal. You also had Richard Freeman, I believe his surname was, who was cryptozoology. Yeah, it's I think it's a slightly smaller lineup this next one, but yeah, it's going to be a good day. But yeah, I will be there. I'm there for the whole event. So I think for the VIP holders, I don't know what the technical term is they're calling them, but the VIPs, they're getting to do an investigation, I think, on the Thursday night at Bosworth Hall. I'll be there for that. So I'll probably be there with my little laptop, checking things as they happen for people. And then I'll be doing the whole day trip on the Friday, and then I'll be there for the whole weekend to natter away to people like I did last time.
And it sounds like a brilliant event for everyone to come together and that's interested in the field, and they get a lot out of it because there's stalls available, and then you sort of get to mingle with people at the party in the evening as well, don't you? So I bet you're excited. Wow, me and Sarah are going. I'm allowed to go this time. Last time I didn't go. This time I am going. So it'll be great to meet you in person as well. We're really excited. To get to see you, get to watch what you do really, and there's a good opportunity to learn from everyone else.
I mean, I know a few of the people are coming. I mean, Rob Thompson's back, who I got to. He was actually sat. His table was next to mine last year. Dan Clays is back, obviously Hinsdale House. Dan. You've got Danny Moss. I don't know Danny, but obviously he's very well known in the UK. I mean, Dave Schrader's going to be there, so I'm going to be putting in front of him the blog I wrote after one of his shows, one of his TV shows. You never shared this, and I tagged you. So yeah, there's I think I can't think what the chap. There's a chap there. He's a hypnotist. Regression. I've just completely forgotten his name. That's really bad, isn't it? He's going to be there as well. So yeah, there's a real variety of people going to be doing talks, and it's going to be an interesting event. 2 weeks before that, I'm doing the Parameet for Neil Packer. So,
okay. Haunted Paranormal Antique Centre, isn't it?
That's the one. So that's 2 weeks before that. So September is going to be a very cool and busy month.
So guys, if you want to meet Penny in person, there's 2 events there. One in Hinckley. It's the Paranormal. I think is it
the Parameet's actually being held at a hotel in Rugby.
Oh, in Rugby.
Yeah, it's a hotel in Rugby. The hotel has got quite cool interest because it was once the home of the chap who invented the jet engine. So, in fact, he's meant to still haunt there. So yes, and then you've got that, and then 2 weeks after, you've got the one at Bosworth, which I wrote. If you bring up my slide again that shows my books, I wrote the book about earlier this year, The Battle for Bosworth Hall.
There we go.
Yeah, the red one. All my covers done absolutely amazingly by Andy Saw, who does all the artwork and graphics for Haunted magazine. He does.
I know. I've got to speak to Andy as well. I've spent the great guys. Him and Paul. I've got to speak to. So brilliant. So we know about the 2 events that are coming up next year that you're going to be taking part on. Just to end on, really, what else are you got planned? You got any more books due out?
Yes, I've got the Epping. I'm writing a book at the moment on. I call it on Epping Forest, but technically it's the Forest of Essex because Epping Forest was only one part of it. I won't go into boring details, but it used to be over 20,000 acres. Now it's nearer 5,000 acres, so you can imagine how big it used to be. I've got a book coming out, and I'm hoping that will be around May time. That will come out, but it really depends on if I keep finding more stuff to add to it. I'm also looking at starting a history tour of Chelmsford, where I live, because there's an awful lot of stuff in Chelmsford that people don't know about. And I took a friend of mine is actually writing a film at the moment to do with something that's to do with Essex, and she asked me to show her where a few things had happened in Chelmsford that are in her film. And I took them on a sort of makeshift tour, and they're like, "You've got to do this for the public." So I'm looking at sort of working on that for probably sort of March, April next year as well. But yeah, if anyone's doing a function and they need someone who can talk for Britain, I can help.
Get in touch with me. And with regards to your books, if people want to go and purchase your books, I know your books are on Amazon.
They are, yeah.
Are they anywhere else that they can be purchased, or is it?
They can contact me direct if they want a signed copy. It might be a little bit more than it is for Amazon because obviously I then have to post it out to them, but they can get a signed copy from me if they'd like to.
Thank you, Scott.
Cheeky. I need to do Greyfriars. I loved it. I've only had a fleeting visit to Glasgow, but I have been to Edinburgh a few times, and I love Edinburgh and the history there and the feel of the place. So I do need to do a proper
Brilliant. And also, just to mention, you can actually find Penny on her Facebook page, Haunted Histories.
Haunted Histories.
And you do some podcasts and things like that on there.
Yep.
So the description's actually Penny's links in the description. So please feel free to go and give Penny a follow. There's some brilliant stuff that she puts up on there. So it's definitely worth having a look.
And there was actually a competition. I've just done the first draw, but I haven't decided if it'll be the 30th or the 31st of this month. I'll be doing another draw for a copy of one of my books, and I'll send it anywhere in the world.
Do you want to tell everyone what they need to do to get entered into the
All
competition?
they need to do, it's very easy. If you've got to be a member of the group, got to be a member of Haunted Histories. There's a post on there. It's pinned. It's called Competition. All you have to do is share the post, comment on the post, and invite someone else to join the group. Bob's your uncle. You're in the draw that will take place at the end of the month.
Brilliant. So there you go, guys. Definitely go to Penny's page, give her a follow, share it out, get someone involved, and then you're entered into the competition automatically. But I just want to thank you, Penny, for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely brilliant speaking with you. It's been loads of fun, and again, can't wait to catch up with you, to meet you in person in September. That's going to be awesome. So thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you to everyone else that's joined in tonight. Scott, you've been brilliant. Everyone's been brilliant with their questions and their comments. We really do appreciate everyone watching. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. And thank you, Penny, again for joining. What I'll do, I'll just pop you into the background, and then once I've closed off, we'll just quickly have a chat, and then I can say my goodbyes. But for now, everyone, thank you.
Thank you,
I think this is our last live before Christmas. So, I just want to wish everyone a happy Christmas and a great New Year. I hope you all have a great time, and we'll see you all in 2023. So, but for now, goodbye, everyone. Take care.